Even since that conversation, since the last time we met and hung out for drinks, what's been going on in your life, in your head? What are you focusing on? What's your priority?
Wow. I think if I were to grab onto to sort of where my intuition's guiding me to grab their priorities, I think priorities, what I would share is, I think having reverence for being open to possibility recently,
Yeah.
has been sort of a muscle, a practice that I've been embracing. I think there's been a practice of surrender lately with everything that's been going on, and Lauren would say life is lifing, and God bless her. I don't know what I would do without her. And we've I think since our last conversation, we've gotten to a really beautiful place, both in our individual lives, and for me, I think it took another sort of seasonal closing of chapters, and even in some ways some emotional breakdowns with coming back from Europe and sort of reintegrating with that experience, and also sort of surrendering to circumstances outside of my control right now, and surrendering to service for my mom, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But I think it's kind of recentered me in a really good way to remember my service, to remember to kind of just be present. Because traveling all the time, being a nomad, sometimes I think that I often forget it's a great mechanism for us for escapism. And I'm guilty of that on many occasions. I've told you the stories. I spent 20 years as a chef, in these tumultuous, heat, stress driven, high intensity, high demand, kitchens. And, it's very visceral, and, growing up that way for 20 years, and masking so much, and being a people pleaser in the coat, and not knowing who I was when I walked into a room when I didn't have those whites on. And it's a new sort of age for me, a new era, if you will, kind of coming into this life now with this new outlook, and sort of where that evolution has brought me since I transitioned from that into software sales, and being a writer and an entrepreneur and a creator. So
Let's I actually want to dig a little more into that part. That part of you that you were, that, let's be real, you probably still are to some extent.
oh, certainly,
Also,
certainly.
moving forward, you want to become. But first, talk more about that guy who would walk into the kitchen. Who was that guy, and who was he outside of the kitchen? And you mentioned how there wasn't really a sense of self outside of that, right?
I think if I were to sum it up, who that guy was ego driven. He knew he was a badass that could walk into any kitchen and own the space and command presence. And I think that was my first real taste of commanding leadership. But certainly in those early years of my, we'll call it, tenure as being a chef, and mostly fine dining kitchens, there's a lot of sort of hierarchy that goes along with that. And with that, you command a certain bravado. And I think that ego is very easily inflated when you're someone like myself, and how I grew up with this, turbulent adolescence, and, grew up with some, we'll say sexual traumas, as well as, some, what some would consider as, PTSD type events. And, it was this beautiful amalgamation of experiences that not only sort of bred this opportunity for me to find a lot of strength in myself, being a chef, and being able to sacrifice myself for the execution, sacrifice myself and discipline myself, and show up no matter what, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 120 hours, it didn't matter. I was able to show up with purpose and get the job done. And I think that's a beautiful trait that I've now started to own and embrace. Because I think everything that we just kind of sort of encapsulated there, the only way I was able to really start to understand who that person was through the reflection. And the only way I was able to reflect on it was to own that then not only was that a part of who I was, but to own my whole experience. And in order to do that, I think I had to start to take a different paradigm or a different optic. And, there were a number of sort of key moments for me that did that for me.
Yeah.
And we talked about a few, authentic relating and that beautiful workshop in Miami that when having the opportunity to now write a book, Radiant Realizations, and use that as a tool, a mechanism, therapeutic sort of modal, if you will. So, I think this conversation will be ever evolving as they often are. Oh, that guy was, he was an addict, and he was very lost, and he was good at being a social chameleon and masking very well. Misunderstood outside of the kitchen, but what was well understood was passion, execution, and the ability to tap into a flow that could command a following.
Yeah.
Wow. We took the long way.
No, that's exactly what I wanted. But less questions on my part. You took care of most of that on your own.
I seeded today when I woke up that I was going to be the greatest podcast guest you've had yet.
You're off to a good start, I'll tell you that.
Oh, good. That's good, man. Because, I think the biggest thing for today was I recognized so many of our conversations hold like such great gravity, and I wish they were captured previously, And I think, as I said, this conversation has been evolving for so long, as it should, rightly, but these things, can rightly be used as transmissions. And I think that's sort of the mission and the purpose that we're both on now, and in different ways, but I think we're working towards the same finish line in a lot of ways. And I see this as, again, another opportunity to be open to possibility, and see what kind of ripples we can have. And, I think the biggest call out from who that guy was back then was he was a guy that was caught in loops. And, I know those loops really, really well. So if I can, share something today that maybe helps someone else break out of those loops and find a different path and start to walk a little bit more of a radiant life of their dreams, then I think.
Well, I wanted to touch on that actually. What was the shift from that guy and those loops that then, turned you toward the different paths?
I think we talked about this. I try and shy away from absolutes. I don't know if it was any one thing. I think it
never is, but there's always that last push,
I would say there are definitely some key moments. Key moments that stand out for me would be, again, a friend of mine whom I've known for many years, whom we've talked about, a mutual friend of ours, through a very turbulent time in my life and sort of the exodus of kitchens and trying to finally it was this really weird period for me. It was like I was undefining who I had built myself up to be and redefining like who I was when I walked into a room, because I didn't know the answer to the latter, but I was definitive through that strong bravado and ego of the former. Yeah. And I think that's a really scary, but reminds me of this quote from Robin Williams. It's like, I think it's Matt Damon. He says, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. And Robin Williams says, how exciting, and for some reason that little mantra, that little film clips plays in my mind and those kind of moments. And I think
Good Will Hunting.
Yeah. Great movie. Love that. Great movie. But yeah, I think it was a gift through pain from sort of that ending and closing of a chapter for me, and getting the opportunity to recognize, to own, to accept that I didn't know how to connect with myself.
Yeah.
I no longer knew how to connect with others. I was invaluable as an individual, even though I could show up in relationships as a partner, but it was to a fault. It was that nice guy syndrome, right? I'd gotten to the point where I was so good at making other people around me happy that I was perpetually unhappy intrinsically. And I think that sort of invex, that sort of deep drop in played its role out in a lot of different ways and sort
I
of
just start to notice that feeling of, all this energy that you're putting out to make others happy. In what ways would it come out in you that where it's, I think when you're saying like it's draining you, it's like, how would you, what was it doing to you?
I think it wasn't so much what it was doing to me. I think it was the way that it projected onto my relationships outside of me. I think it was, it was a constant projection of dissatisfaction on partners. And no matter how great my partners or my friendships were, I never quite was able to feel them, see them, empathize in more meaningful ways. And I think if I were to put myself in their shoes, the relationships felt kind of one-sided. And in some ways, I think I've come to realize that I was very much an energy harvester, because I didn't know how to really connect, the simple things. And I think that was part of sort of the upbringing I was brought up in. I had military parents. It was, don't feel it, fix it. Right. And pair that with ADHD and maybe a touch of some other, nuances, if you will, idiosyncrasies. I would say, I was not really ever taught to connect with my emotions, interpret my emotions, to as my great friend and coach would say, and I'm probably bastardizing this in a way he won't appreciate, but notice, accept, presence, and resume, right? Like, that's a common rationale that I think is taught, maybe not so clinically, by parents if you're in a healthy sort of upbringing, but I don't think I was ever given that. So I would say in some ways, it felt very like the playbook I was given growing up didn't apply to what most societal or like, again, I just didn't know how to connect. I was never taught how to connect. It's not that I didn't empathize. It's not that I didn't feel or actually connect intrinsically. I just didn't have the social mechanisms, the cues, the communication attributes to allow me to exchange, to team, And I think from that, it was more like receiving. And then with the ADHD, it was often interpreted as arrogance, because I knew what they were, or I thought I knew. I interpreted, long before the sentence is over, you're like ready to respond. And so, I tell you, man, it's
No, but you touched on a lot of things there just now, and it's like, good luck at that. One thing that really did. No, I'm not editing. This is all going to be in there. I'm not editing any of this out. I'm just kidding. Actually, I don't even edit. Pretty much don't edit anything, because the point is to really keep it.
I like that,
as natural as possible. I think you mentioned in there that really got my attention was, this, when you were touching on how you didn't have the right skill sets or the right, we'll go with skill sets that were passed on to you by your parents or by your upbringing, life experience, whatever you want to call it, childhood.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize how much of who they are is a consequence of that, of their childhood, of their parent dynamic, their relationship with their father, with their mother, or the lack of. And there's so much that then gets translated into your relationships, and not just romantic relationships. It's every relationship, every person you meet, people that you work with, people like kids. Yeah. I went down this whole fucking road, man, with relationships and dating and love and what all that means. And it always goes back to that part of you, the behaviors, the traits that you learn as a child to survive in whatever circumstance you were. Survive sounds a little intense, but for some it is. I mean, for me, it felt like survive. For every child, names, right? Sure. At the end of the day, you're coming into this world and you're like, oh yeah, well, is this world? What the fuck this world in this economy? Yeah. But it's got to start working at 6 to be able to retire nowadays. So again, it goes all back and all the self-awareness, self-healing, all that is an opportunity for you to look at those aspects of your life, your foundation, and then be able to grow through action, through practice.
If you're lucky. If you're lucky.
If you're lucky to even become self-aware of that in and of itself is a moment.
That's a major massive right there. Yeah.
That's such a big, in a lot of ways, that's even a privilege and even recognize that.
And that's that paradigm shift, right? That's that loop. I think even just, by somebody recognizing and maybe even relating that to an unawareness that they may not have, and I like that analogy you used about tools, right? Like for me, I'm very systems based. I'm very practical, pragmatic, logical. That's what makes sense to me. I'm very organized, not only as a chef, mise en place. That's why that made sense. Like I could always perfectly execute because, the military background, and my dad would say, proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance, right? Don't forget your piece.
Oh, that translates beautifully into cooking. And
exactly, right? So it was like, there was a place for everything and everything in its place. And what was crazy to me, and this has been a recent sort of radiant realization, right? And it was that I was in there. So I was so good at organizing things in the kitchen. Like if I had that structure, if I put the coat on, if I had my apron on, if my towel was in place, I had my spoon, my tongs, my mies, my utensils. I was in complete control and ownership of my experience. There was not much that could stand in my way of a perfect execution of my desired objectives. But when I walked out of that kitchen, that person was not equipped with that same tool set, with that same knowledge, refinement, centered focus, and attention. But I think a lot of that was, one, I used the kitchen as escapism, and Anthony Bourdain, made it like this romantic gesture.
Anthony Bourdain.
I've always loved him. And I think I probably carry a lot of that same intrinsic sort of descriptive communication into, my writing and into my speaking now and into how I describe food and experiences. It's this beautiful, this like, I'm just thinking about like the last few things that I tasted that were so delicious. Right. And like, it's just, it swarms you with just this emotionality, this feeling. And, I just wanted to live my life that way. And I know I'm kind of bouncing around tangentially here, but, again, I think it was, just as most would portray it, in complete control on one side, but chaotic, out of control.
And then you also think about how much time and practice went into just that part of your life, being a chef. So then if you take
countless hours,
countless hours, that's what I'm saying. But then you have to consider that, okay, there's other parts of my life that I want to improve. If it's my health, my fitness, if it's
scary loss.
Yeah, right. If it's the way I, act in relationship.
Right.
A lot of times it's going to be that amount of work.
Yeah.
Which is scary. But it's at the same time, it's also kind of leaves you in this place where you realize there's always something that is meaningful that's worth pursuing, that you can work on, whether it is something about yourself, a time or passion or an act of service, just whatever aspect of your life that you want to work on, it's always there with something.
It's funny you say that. And Brian would say that what I'm doing right now is making my intuition a first-class citizen and kind of letting it be my compass, right? Mm-hmm. So what's coming up for me is I think that was the bridge for that turning point, right? Like what helped me break the loop was that being a chef allowed me to really hone a practice, to be able to focus innately. But I didn't have the awareness that there were other areas of my life that I needed to focus that attention. But I think a lot of it for me was what made me feel the most centered.
I was going to say,
being in the
it
kitchen.
becomes comforting, right? When you find something that you're good at, and it brings you all these things that maybe as a kid you wanted, whether it was validation, attention, or even just being able to be good at something and getting recognized for that, right? So then when you start becoming that
Right.
in an aspect of your life and you see the feedback, you see the positive feedback, then you're like, oh, I want it more. It's like a drug. You're like, oh, fuck yeah, this is the path I'm supposed to be on. This is what I should keep spending more time on.
Right.
Forget everything else. Like, this is it. And I think that's important too. I think you need that because it is, you know, I like the saying, and I'm never good with quotes, so I always phrase it. I don't even know who or where it comes from, but it's about, you know, it's better to be on a sail with a set direction instead of wandering aimless.
Right. You can't control the wind, but you can certainly set your sails.
Yeah. But the whole idea is like whatever path you choose, whatever action you take, as long as you're doing something
Right.
intentionally, you're choosing to do it.
But that's it.
It's going to take you where you need to go.
And I think that's, you know, the bridge from before that I was looking to mention was the ever being a student, right? Like that's what made me a great chef.
Yeah.
But I didn't take that same sort of perpetual student mentality into life and like really establish those intentional actions because I didn't even know what my buckets of happiness were. You know, for me now, they're spiritual, holistic, personal, and professional. If I can fill those 4 buckets, right? Personal being health, athletics, you know, taking care of my relationship and showing up as a partner and showing up as an individual and making those bold proclamations through, you know, holistic purposes. The book, you know, that was the whole reason I wanted to write the book was because I knew that there was still work for me to be done. And I set out with a purpose that through this therapeutic tool, it would allow me to sort of embody that individual, that better self that was ready to share those lessons, to share those moments where I'm like, man, at what point would a rational person give up? Because at some point, this is just crazy, you know? But that was where, when I removed myself from the kitchens, I was able to replace food and the kitchens from being this thing that even at my worst, and I do mean my worst, I could flick a light switch on and still pay the bills. That complacency mentality was also effectively eluded for me. Yeah. And it wasn't until I left a long-term relationship and left the life behind and really had to like burn it all down and really break myself down and say, no, this isn't how I meant to live life. Life is way too short for this. That I made some bold proclamations, and it was like, you know, I gave up smoking after 16 years, you know, gave up cigarettes, and I left the kitchen and through that, you know, commercial kitchen exodus, there were a couple of years where I said, you know what, I'm going to fill my life with experience, but still do what I know I'm good at. And I did 2 years as a private chef on a 100-foot motor yacht and, you know, toured the Exumas and the Caribbean and then had some great experiences. But I think through that, and it's funny that this topic just came up because right before we sat down, one of the songs I put on was a song that during that key moment changed for me. I was on the boat and it was my first like pink flash sunset over Staniel Cay and the Exumas. And I just remember that first time where I reached out and I grabbed and owned my experience and I said, I created this. I made this rational choice. I was intentional with my actions. And here I am making $1,000 a day to cook for beautiful people and a beautiful experience. And I think that was the first real key turning point for me. And that's been one that I've anchored in, and I have like my song that brings me back to that moment. I can close my eyes right now, put myself on the port side of that boat and remember every smell, touch, taste, feel what I was cooking for dinner that night, who was there. Like I remember all of it. I have a song that really kind of, I do it before demos when I'm about to go into sales presentations. I do it before, you know, I know that I really want to tap into that energy because the world needs me lit up.
Yeah. in all of us in that space.
And I think to be a conscious leader nowadays, that's really the goal, right? It's showing up innately in that true mission driven focus and purpose, and just staying as much as we can in sort of that synchronicity and being tapped in, tuned in, turned on.
It's a good place to pause right there. Fairly good. I know this camera already dead. Yep.
Is it? Intermission.
You're still alive. Those are still going. You can say or do whatever you want right now.
Yeah. You act like
whatever you're publicly active will do it. I might just be a little long here.
But that's okay. I'm really enjoying this, man. I'm having a great time.
Dude, me too.
What a beautiful morning for it, too.
What I love about, this ended up going exactly the way I wanted it to. When it comes to lighting, to soft lighting.
Everything's working out.
Yeah. Do a little reset. I actually like, it's so funny because I'm gonna miss this not being a problem. Because it's actually a good way to do a reset.
Yeah.
And you stop it at the right moment. And that's the tricky part. It's like sometimes the conversation is going to be too important to just cut it off. And that's what I have to navigate. But that's also where it's like, okay, I need to get a better camera. That's the real answer.
Well, if I were to put that back to you, I would say, much like our conversations, the right conversation, the intentional conversation, like it's an evolution, right? Like it'll continue, you know?
And even for me, I have to sometimes remind myself, like even right now, this is new for me. So,
plus, I mean,
when I'm
look at what we get to do right now. Like, I still kind of sit in that and like remember that former version, right? Like, you got me all this older stuff, these old memories coming up, right? Like, what would me 2014? What would he have been doing? If he had slept yet, depending on any given day, what's today? Tuesday? Yeah, I'd probably be putting an order away or knee deep in tickets,
corporate office desk. And
do you miss it? I think I know the answer, but
no, I don't miss. What I miss is the people, the physical aspect of it, being around people, working with people, having these interactions.
Right.
It's so natural, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, it still feels like you're a part of something. So there's a disconnect with what I do now that I love, because the people that I get to work with, they're good people, but again, it's fully remote there. So there's a disconnect. You can only be a part of each other's lives so much.
For sure.
It's like you're not physically there.
I can totally
relate. At the same time, it gives me so much freedom that I can't. There's too much good with what I have now. It allows me to pursue what I want to do next.
Right.
But the corporate part, being in an actual office, I do miss that part of it. It's like being with people, working with people. And I do want to eventually do that with this too. When I go more into film, and ideally, right now I'm pretty much a one-man crew, and I did that on purpose. The idea is, let me learn every aspect of this. That way, when the time is right, and I'm naturally building a team to work with, that will be my people that I want to be around, work with, build with, create with. This is just a natural part of that process.
Yeehaw.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So let me ask you this. So through, your recent evolution of this project, right? And we were talking before about like reflection, of your former self. What reflections, what ways have some of the things that we just talked about shown up for you? ooh, or what intuitively. Let's do an exercise.
Okay.
If we take a moment, just remember the breath for a minute, and we were to center, making intuition sort of the first class citizen that it is. What about the conversation so far has been seated in something that you'd drive towards? What comes up for you in like a relative way? What about
So the first thing that comes to my mind is, I've thought about it so many times now that it feels overdone to even say it, because you know your life, and you know what you've been through, and you know the monologues you're gone through in your head and ruminated on.
right?
And for me, it's the first thought that just came to my mind was, I wish that what I went through, let's say during COVID time, and it's a lot of people that I know share a similar experience, that kind of awakening in that moment. I wish all my friends, everyone I know, everybody had that.
Yeah.
I wish for them to have that at some point in their lives.
Yeah.
I'm also a realist, and I know that doesn't happen for everybody.
No, unfortunately.
But for me, yeah, man, I mean, that chapter and everything that has happened since, it blows my mind just how much change and life I've been through and being at the age that I am, and the idea of the rest of my life, what that has to offer is insane.
Sure, like this compounding, like
Yeah, exactly. So it's this, like, hold on. So in this amount of time, as 4 or 5 years, I've gone through so much change, so many waves, so many different directions.
right.
Also very intentionally at the same time, but we're having a healthy balance of, like, for me, I told you this before, I can be disciplined, and I am, but I'm also spontaneous as fuck. Like, I will always be open to other avenues,
Spontaneous?
to other directions, to other experiences.
Yeah.
But that's really what came to me. It was this kind of, similar to your experience of who you were. There's overlaps when it comes to, for sure, the people pleasing side of me, the nice guy in me, and I went deep into that too for myself. Like, I know where it comes from. With my dynamic with my parents, my mom and I having a very reverse, caretaking role. I always took care of her. And that was the way it was with my sister. Like, we were a team, and we're always focused on her. So you start to connect the dots of, okay, those were the survival skill sets that I picked up as a child. Right? Yeah. It was very much like, I want to make sure you're good. I want to make sure you're happy. Yeah. You're taken care of. And that starts to translate into friendships and relationships and work. The thing is,
good ways and bad ways. Yeah, that's how you and I connected. But I think that's also where you and I have both experienced the same volatility.
Similar, exact. That's the thing, man. I love listening to podcasts. I love listening to these, things about self-growth, self-healing, all that.
Right.
But I'm sick of hearing people-pleasing being the label for every behavior. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I also think there's so much good in that. Like we just talked about, it's like being of service to others.
Right.
There's an honor in that. It's not just being self-centered all the time. It's also kindness and being good. We need more of that.
Right.
I think it's easy. It's easy to be bad. Let's put it that way. And it's hard to be good.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, all of these are traits, and I had to go through a similar journey where I realized that those traits that I learned as a child don't serve me the same way anymore as an adult.
You needed new tools to build new bridges.
Yeah, man. And that's been the past 4 or 5 years. It's kind of chipping away at that.
Yep.
And molding into what I feel is the better version of myself, the ideal that I want to strike.
I love that.
And it's never ending, but that's
No.
part of life. That's what keeps it interesting too.
And you speak about interesting. I think that has been sort of one appreciation you and I both have is watching each other sort of have this evolution of self. All boats floating higher in a rising tide kind of thing,
We've been through crazy evolution.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
And I think that's why, I think the supportive aspect comes through for not only individual projects and life success, but also taking that and letting it kind of ripple out, right? It's and we talked about, consciousness and kind of this we'll call it mission, if you will, of being able to get oneself to a place where we can start to calibrate others around us and sort of let that be sort of this collective tide, if you will, that we're rising. I'm sure, the undertones of what I'm saying now is translated in your Aubrey Marcus podcast, thought leadership here and so on. But, looking at it in a more pragmatic or practical way, I think that, it's, I always think about it in sort of this mantra that David Hawkins talks about in Map of Consciousness. It's like, once you start to embody the values and sort of the mantra that this life is an opportunity, it's a dharmic opportunity to leave things better than we found them, right? I think at the seed of who I am, like my soul center molecule, it's wanting to leave things better than I found them. And I think for the first time in my life and with a new toolkit, building new bridges, and I think that's really where we're at now, both of us, is that we recognize we need tools.
No.
We recognize we need to know how to use those tools, and we need to know how to use those tools in strategic or logical, applicable ways for the betterment of not only ourselves, but in service of others. And I think that's really where my mission sort of flipped funnels, right? And it became less about this self-centeredness and more about centeredness and service.
So, love that transition. But talking about building bridges.
Yeah.
New bridges.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this book.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned it.
Well, I'll tell you a story of how it came from, where it came from. So,
That for me, that's one of the pivotal whys that I want to hear more about.
And it's one that I've missed for a long time.
Why this book? What's what motivated it? What brought it to existence? What is it? Let's talk about all that. Let's dig into it.
Big statement.
Yeah.
I think at its roots, it's a therapeutic tool for me. I knew I still had a long way to go and a journey ahead of me. And, even through what I was able to reflect on was a lot of positive progression and momentum. I still struggle every day with addiction and former traits, thoughts, patterns, and I still find myself in another tool, Brian would refer to this. Brian's my coach. I think you met with. Would refer to this as a sort of a heuristic, but it's like, if we imagine conversational pathways as highways, and I still find myself in these experiences of life, this pathway of experience. And, sometimes circumstances trigger me to be on an off ramp for a road going down a direction that I don't have the map, that I don't understand the journey or the pathway. I've never been there before. And a lot of times, those can often not allow you to own the experience. And you suffer older patterns. You find yourself in old traits, old patterns, old habits. And I think for me, the book at its center is, I've heard so many times, I told stories about, when I was a kid and this happening or the days as a disgruntled youth in the BMX spaces or, being shot.
Well, you've been chapters, my guy.
And there's so much, there's so much. And one thing I remember hearing for so many years is, people would tell me like, I love your energy, when you're speaking passionately and man, you should really expand on that story. And like, people need to hear this. And I think for a long time I was closed off to praise, to receiving inference from not only the universe, from those around me that loved and cared about me. And that was that lack of connection. So through authentic relating and learning to own my experience, respect myself and other, and through embodying those principles, part of that evolution of self was I needed to now get this stuff down on paper and really start to do some shadow work through not only recollecting and allowing my intuition to drive those conversations, but then spilled out into paper in these visceral, just, and I'll be honest, it literally, it invoked, just through writing this, I had to practice somatic breath work just so I could still hold space and still, process. And there was a lot of release and a lot of tears and a lot of, it was 2.5 months of being locked in a cabin in Maine on the water in Bar Harbor and basically just completely disconnected from my connected life and really just sitting in that beautiful but fucking scary space. But this time knowing that I had so many more tools than I had 5 years ago when I started this journey. And I think in some ways, I've known this is something I've needed to do for a long time. And I finally just grabbed myself by the balls and said, all right, it's time. And the universe kind of tipped its hat to me. And I still have those moments, the radiant realizations, if you will. And for me, those are like those moments where the universe, where life kind of points you in the right direction, right? Or it's that moment where you realize like everything happened for a reason, and I've given them this funny little moniker. It's like chicken nuggets for the soul, right? It's like there's little moments where you just get that little nibble of like, all right, I see you, universe. Like it makes sense. All right.
Now you
Feel that.
when you're saying those phrases, I want to make sure first let's give the title of the books. What's
Radiant Realizations.
Radiant Realizations?
Yep.
And the chicken nuggets of the book. How's that? I know that's part of kind of their theme. What's that about the book?
I think so. For one, for me, it was recognizing that through this 20 years, this tumultuous, like scary, ego-driven life as a chef, I got a great opportunity to see the universe in a different way. And I think through this unique set of circumstances and experiences that I've been through, I get to see the universe and life in a really unique perspective. And I wanted to share that along with the tools, the exercises, the practices, the readings that I've accumulated to break those loops. Because like I said before, life is just too fucking short, man. I was shackled to a fluorescent box for 20 years of my life. And I've always been one that loves to sort of like go to the opposite side of the spectrum. And that's why it was like, I'm going to have complete locational freedom, financial freedom. I'm going to do something completely different. I go from being a chef to being a governance, risk, and compliance consultant, working in tech and software sales and doing something completely different, being an entrepreneur, founder, creator. I think I just love experiences. I love challenging myself. And I think that the book for me was a challenge. It was an opportunity to truly center into myself and tap into those stories that inevitably will reflect positively with someone. And
I wanted to touch on that too. So now that you went through that process, how do you feel on the other side of it personally, but also...
You want the honest answer? You want the real answer? Honest answer is I feel like I could work on this book until I go to my grave, honestly. But I recognize that at some point we have to share that voice. We have to share that again, in my hopes, embodiment of conscious leadership by just taking the opportunity and being open to the possibility that it will help change someone's life. Yeah, just being surrendering to that.
As part of, you could say the evolution of man is that realizing that's what we're here to do. We're here to express, to share, to live, and not just be passive consumers, and living a standby life.
Yeah. I think in this moment, what comes up for me right now is that I think for a long time I've been scared to have an impact. And I think in a lot of ways I've sabotaged myself and suffered from just that innate don't feel it, fix it. And I'm constantly creating situations to fix because I wasn't confident that the way I felt was going to allow me to evolve, to move forward. And I think the biggest thing for me about this was confronting that fear, and for the seekers, the creators, the founders, the chefs, the cooks, the seemingly nobodies, it's about sharing something that I hope will have an impact.
What kind of impact are you hoping it's going to have?
I mean, if they're anything like me, I hope it grabs them by the bootstraps and lifts them the fuck off, because, sometimes you need that kick in the ass, and I needed a fire. For me, it was heartbreak. It was realizing I didn't know who I was when I walked into a room and how completely fucking scary that was. I mean, I think I was, 30 or 31 when I just reached this point where it was like, I laugh about it. Just looking back on the amount of true fear that I felt, like, man, I could feel my body, like somatically, I feel that like intensity, that heat coming up about what that felt like, grasping the edge of the bed, just being like, fuck. And just like for the first time, just like not looking around to start fucking bawling, crying. And I think that was like that experience for me, that key turning point showed up in a more impactful situation when I went to that workshop in Miami for authentic relating. And that was the first time where it was like, I had this coming up for air moment. Like the first time from that complete, oh fuck, to, all right, maybe we're on the right track here. And for me, that was like,
I was going to say, give some context to what that is, the authentic relating.
Yeah, sure.
Quick, like what's the setup? What is that?
I was gifted a workshop from a friend of mine for authentic relating in a hope to further my journey of being able to truly connect, hold sustained eye contact. For me, that was hard. I still do it. You see me looking off. And that's just because I was taught to be hyper aware. I'm ADHD. I've learned to embrace those aspects, but also balance them with presence and being here. And I enjoy conversations, and it's easy to connect, when we're tapped into those things. So learning those things, but also just that can be a powerful moment between two people. For a former version of me, that would have made my skin crawl. So authentic relating taught me that through their 5 core principles. And it's really an embodiment of these 5 core principles. Okay. And I invite everyone to look it up. There's workshops all around the world. They're a global organization. But this workshop, I remember the experience so viscerally. I was wearing a green Banana Republic long sleeve. I showed up in clean cut, short hair. And, the proverbial pretty boy, a lot of people often judge me. And I've heard that, the marketing doesn't match the product. People think that, I tend to, in a former version, show up very arrogantly because I was putting on this mask, right?
Do you finish what you were going to say?
I was going to say this workshop for me, I think I remember it, the first real meaningful share in front of what was 25 strangers who quickly became some people that I will always cherish for the rest of my life. It was that first group share where I finally had to surrender to this wall. It felt like this army of embarrassment and judgment. Just like, but for the first time, I think I sought the discomfort of, instead of searching for answers and feeling like a freediver, just going deeper and deeper and less oxygen, more exertion, darkness, vacuum, silence, pressure. For the first time, I just said, the answers aren't down there. It's surrendering to being out in the light and letting everything just be visible, and radical transparency and radical authenticity. And I think that was the journey, was the authenticity, because that's what I lacked. So it's showing up authentically. And I ended up being the first, like, for all intents and purposes, breakdown, share, meaningful, just exuberant, somatic release. I was bawling, crying. Everybody was just shocked because here's this guy that looks kept and clean cut, well put, well presented, and I masked so well.
Yeah.
But to see something so fractured and so broken clearly for so long. I think it really was an opportunity for that courageousness that hopefully comes through in the book. It comes through the shared experiences, through the vulnerability, the depth, the descriptiveness that I hope will allow others to feel cracked open the same way I was.
I love that. Do you think that mask is still there?
Certainly. I think I use it for good nowadays. I hope I use it for good nowadays.
I think that's an important piece right there. You know, it's
Masking's not a
not
bad thing.
just about. Well, what I'm talking about is more. It's not just about focusing on. This is how I see it, but it's not just about focusing on, oh, these are bad traits, I had to get rid of them. You know, and again, it's not about being absolute, like you said. You don't like to be absolute. And I'm the same way. I don't look at anything like completely absolute. I don't speak in absolutes because we're here in this infinite universe. There's no such thing. Like there's, but again, I don't think we should be focusing so much on just getting rid of these things, these traits. I think the better evolution is what you just said, which is finding a way to use it as a good. How do you kind of redirect it in a way where it's not taking from you or anyone around you, but in fact is actually an act of service when giving to others or just being a good thing for society. I think there's room for all of that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that too, because I mean, again, if I kind of lend this to another bridge here, that's really what the book is meant to be. It's meant to be a toolbox, right? Because every chapter has a reflection, it has a practice, it has a tool that feels applicable to that set circumstance or that time, that season of my life. And life is ebbs and flows. Life is about seasons. There's a reason for every season. For me, the season that I just came through it was time to share impact and to break yet another loop. And the universe really teed up a beautiful set of circumstances, as it always does, if we're willing to listen. And this time I was open to listening. And I think, going back to the masking thing, I think one way of masking that I've recognized recently is if I carry the conversation, if I hold the conversation, I'm good at talking. My grandma used to say it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. If you can command a conversation. And it's one way I've masked, because if I don't stop talking, I don't have to.
No one has to ask you the question. No one has to give you. I don't have to put a microscope on you.
So I welcome that. So I'm curious, we talked about the book a little bit. We talked about.
Well, I was going to say, you want to give a little more context about how people are going to get access to this book? What's the timeline?
Sure.
What's it right now?
My hopes are that by the time you release this, we're going to have a couple different assets available to us. So we're going to do, for anyone who watches the podcast, I want to offer the first free chapters, just following a law that I like to practice. And it's, providing more value than I accept in payment. I think that lends itself to the service. So what I want to do is I want to release this first sort of pre-order opportunity for anyone who listens to the podcast, give them the first chapter and really just give them an opportunity to share their feedback if it connects. And if it does, it's going to be available on Amazon Kindle. And then from there, the next step here is really opening everyone up to a collective type project. So the Radiant Collective is really going to be a collection, creators, founders, entrepreneurs, people that are looking to shift from that loop-based lifestyle of complacency and contempt. It's really breaking free and then finding independence intrinsically and leveraging a new set of tools to build new bridges. And that's really what the book is about. It's meant to be, again, sort of the chicken soup for the soul of the millennial age, right? Oh, I'm an elder millennial of chicken nuggets. So chicken nuggets for the soul, right? Chicken nuggies,
Everybody loves that. Yeah, we'll leave all that in the description and people can get it.
For sure, yeah.
All that.
And through that, starting a number of different other avenues. So I'll have a profile page that I can share with you for author-related content, more about the book. Through that, I have my link set up where you'll be able to access not only that first chapter, hopefully also a link to this podcast, as well as where they can access more information on anything we've talked about, any of the tools or coaching that I've received or can refer. And then also, really cool resources, the list of books that I find have helped me in certain ways, and share exercises, principles, practices. But for me, it's really
Full package. It allows there.
again, this is now turning sort of the funnel outward. So it's going to be expansive, and it's meant to be expansive because it's not only an expansion of me through the book, but it's also hopefully an expansion of how we're all awakening, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And hopefully through this can be a mechanism that will have impact. And I want it to have impact. I stand behind the impact of it. And I think that for me is why this is meant, again, for those seekers, those who want to change, who want to do something different. Because if a lowly cook, highest paid dishwasher can become, a tech savant, GRC consultant, entrepreneur, founder, creator, writer, like you can be anything you want to be with the right tools. So if I can open my toolbox and shine a light on it and let somebody grab something for them that can help them, let's share the tools there.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I want to leave with one more thing.
Sure.
And take your time.
A little bit, man. This has been so.
Oh, this has been great.
I feel like we could do this for. Tell you that we're enough tired.
Is not enough.
We're enough tired. I hope that we continuation is.
Tell everyone, there's going to be more. Like I want people to come back.
I hope so.
And I want it to be an evolution. And you and I, we do this for fun. So yeah, we know we're going to do this no matter what. It's just a matter of me setting up cameras.
Yeah,
and that's it. Otherwise, this is another day. But take a second to think about it. Take a moment. But what's something that we haven't talked about that you want to bring to light, that you want to tell people on the podcast? Not even people on the podcast, just here. Something you want to talk about. There's something else.
I think if I'm honoring what's coming through right now, it's, I hope that this is a seed that has much greater fruition than I may know right now. The goal here is to again, hopefully have an opportunity to share something that reverberates in a really meaningful way. And if nothing else carries through here, I hope that somebody feels that pull and wants to understand how they can start to welcome radiant realizations for themselves and start to chain and piece these once in a lifetime experiences together through, again, just service to supporting the collective rising of the tides. So
what about something else?
Sure.
Something not about what we're talking about. I think we don't know about you. It can be the most random, silly, ridiculous thing. I want to know more about you. And to keep it in the realm of what I want to know, what's your why? Goes back to the why that we haven't talked about. The way you see the world. Where are you at? What do you want next? I'm just throwing shit out there. You're sure. Grab something, see where it takes you.
What I want to see next is an evolution of not only the conversation around the book and what it sparks for others, but I want to see an evolution of myself and how I can show up as a conscious leader and continue to hold sacred not only the transmission of what we share energetically, but how I can share impact and really support that evolution and journey for myself selfishly, but also for you and for others. And I call in the opportunity, the possibility for the activities, the audiences, the active energy, I guess you could say, to make all of this a reality. I really just want this book to land right with the right people, and again, just share a reflection, even if it's scary, because it is scary. This book has been one of the scariest fucking things I've ever done to share.
Listen, man, I love that this is the path that you're on, that you went through this chapter of literally writing a book, which is amazing. And I know that
I never thought I'd be a writer,
right? Then that's,
I've always had the dialogue in my head, but I never was like, I'm going to sit down.
but I love that you have the opportunity to even, in this process, have this self-therapeutic experience. That's what it sounds like to me.
I think, honestly, I'm just curious to know who I'm going to be on the other side of it. And part of me is really just trying to presence and be specific, like get specific about what that person does for the world, what that person says, who he carries with him, and what he carries when he walks in.
Cheers to who that person will become. And I can't wait to see who that will be.
Let's go, baby. Yeehaw.
Oh, yeah. I think this is a good spot right here, man.
Dude, I love this, man. Thanks so much for having me, brother.